Hello and welcome to the Farmhouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
And today we are going to be talking to Liza Goetz. Liza is the owner of Wildly Native Flower Farm, which is a flower farm on the Eastern Shore in Maryland. And we originally met Liza when we were on the road and attending the Mid-Atlantic Women in Ag Conference right outside of Annapolis, Maryland. And she took some time to answer our questions, and you can actually hear her responses if you go back and listen to the on the road. Yeah, on the road with Women in Ag episode. But she's back now to talk to us some more about her operation.
And I also, when we were at that conference, attended the session that Liza presented and wrote an article about her. So if you would want to read that, head to our website at lancasterfarming.com. And if you just type in Wildly Native, you should be able to find it.
All right, so let's get going with Liza. I can't wait to hear more about how she and her team are running this flower farm. Steph and I are both gardeners, and we love talking flowers, so we're both excited for this one.
Yes, we're flower enthusiasts. Liza, welcome to the Farmhouse. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here.
So we always start out with the same question for everyone, which is, did you always want to work in agriculture?
I can confidently say absolutely yes to that. I didn't exactly know what I was going to do, but I always knew that ag was my passion, and it was never a question.
Great. So can you tell us about Wildly Native Flower Farm? Why did you want to grow and then later on arrange flowers?
So I'm going to clarify that real quick.
Okay.
I'm the grower. My daughter is the arranger because
Gotcha.
I've always had a passion for growing things. When I was a little kid, I would go out with my mom in the garden and we would be outside together. She would put things in the ground and then I would be behind her most of the time pulling them back out until I learned to leave them in. I've always loved anything that had to do with ag, and my undergraduate degree is in horticulture from Delaware Valley University. And I really had a vision for wanting to be able to continue doing something on our family farm. We're a multi-generational farm, and I knew I didn't want to be corn, soy, and wheat. I knew I wanted to do something different. And for the longest time, I was convinced I was going to grow raspberries. And I am the furthest thing from raspberries at this point. Life happens. You kind of have this dream, you go to college, and life kind of has some twists and turns sometimes that, are unexpected. I worked in wholesale greenhouse for many, many years. And I did all kinds of things in that field. I ran a lot of annuals. I worked in the perennials. I did a lot of different functions in that space, which was a wonderful experience for me now, but I didn't know it then. Paused my career for a little while because little people come into your life and they kind of shift your focus a little. And I was huge into Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and church groups and all of those things. I was trying to figure out how do I incorporate ag? How do I get kids outside? How do I constantly do those things? I ended up getting certified as went back to school, got my master's in education, got certified to teach biology and some chemical, like chemistry, that kind of like physical sciences and things like that. So I got a couple different certifications. I saw an ad for a biology tutoring kind of position that they had at our local high school. And I was like, oh, I can do that. And reached out, and they were like, I had to explain who I was and my background and stuff like that. And they were like, "Ooh, we have this ag program." I was like, "Dude, I'm not certified in ag. I that would be great, but I'm not certified in that." And they were like, "But we have this ag program." I was like, "Okay, I'll come in and I'll sit down and I'll talk to you." And I went in and I sat down and started to understand what they were looking for. There was no ag program where I was growing up in the Bucks County region where I went to school. It wasn't an option. So I didn't know much about FFA and things like that initially. And when I went to college, Del Val had FFA, and that's when I started to get involved in it. And it's so crazy to me how life is so many circles that eventually intertwine, because I ended up with that teaching position at the high school, was there for 14 years. And it was one of my students who came to me. So my daughter went to school at the same high school where I taught. She was awesome in the floriculture competition division. And we started doing all of these competitions, and I had really strong ag business kids. I had good job skill kids. I had all of these different things. And one of my previous students came to me and she said, I'm engaged. I really want you to do my wedding. She called me during my lunch break. Lizzie happened to be standing next to me. And at that point, I had been growing for a little bit. And I was like, ooh, no, I'm not doing a wedding. No, I will grow the flowers. And Lizzie was standing next to me. She's like, oh, yeah, sure, we can do that. And I was like, no, we can't. So she is definitely the design brain. And I am the let's do the numbers, check the fertilizer, look for bugs. And can I please just go get on the tractor? Don't make me arrange. So just want to clarify, I'm not the design side. So that was a very long story kind of explaining kind of how we got into everything.
I mean, I love that though. I love that it's, something with you and your daughter that you're able to do together.
Yeah. Initially it was my daughter, my son, and I, because he is going to school for ag and he is my tractor guy. So I would be like, hey, I want to rototill this section. And he'd be like, all right, bet. So we'd hop on the tractor and he would like, we're going to this and we're going to that, and we're going to this, and we'll plow this and do that, and it's virgin soil. And I was like, all right, dude, stuff is rubbed off on you. Okay. But then eventually, he's gotten a little bigger and now his truck is cooler than mom. So, and he's in college and doing all of the age appropriate things. But if it wasn't for those foundational years of the kids and I really kind of doing it together, it wouldn't have happened.
Wow. Such a cool story of like how you got everything launched and going. That's really cool. And I know now, so for our listeners who don't know, we were able to meet Liza at the Mid-Atlantic Women in Ag Conference back in February, and I attended one of her, she gave a talk about marketing and her farm and all of that. And I learned from that talk that your farm at this point, you have, I think it's 2 acres of floral production, plus you have hoop houses and a greenhouse. So I'm sure you didn't quite start with all of that. So how were you able to scale your business over the years?
I think the biggest way that we have scaled is I listened. I definitely went into this with a perspective of, I'm going to grow flowers, I'm going to wholesale, I'm going to do these things, and it's going to be great. And as I was doing those things, I realized, first of all, that I didn't understand the scale to which I needed to grow things. I had a plot that was probably the size of like somebody's average living room kind of space. And I stood back, I had like 1,000 different seeds planted, and I was like, okay, I'm a grower, this is great. And I stood out there in the middle of the summer when everything had grown and the weeds were there and everything was just taking over. And I was like, wow, I have a lot to learn. And I did a lot of research and I spent a lot of time taking as many classes as I could. And I realized that I didn't need 1,000 seeds total. I then realized I needed 1,000 seeds for each variety that I really wanted to kind of jump into. And then COVID happened. So we started in 2017. I was part-time, farming, and then, which technically was probably full-time farming, but that's a whole separate perspective. And full-time ag teacher. So it was great because summertime, all of the things, you're able to do all of the stuff. And I just had to make a decision once COVID happened. We got so busy. Things just kind of, no pun intended, grew. And we got to a space where I was like, oh my God, I'm running 2 jobs. I can't answer the phone during the day. I have somebody else who's once in a while able to pick up the phone for me. Like I was like, either I'm going to do this and do it right and run a business, or I'm going to always have it as a side hobby. And I went to my husband and I was like, so, and he was like, do I need to be sitting down? It's like, you may want to lay down this time. But I just was like, I I'm to the space, and he always explains my perspective and his perspective, where his life has always been very, I'm going to pack my parachute. I'm going to make sure it is correct. I'm going to make sure the safeties are all there. I'm going to make sure everything is right. And I'll jump and I'm still going to be worried. Where he's like, I don't know how you do it, but you jump, you figure out the parachute while you're jumping, and you just land on your feet and keep running. And I think that's business. I think that's listening and being able to react and understand what works and what doesn't work. Because I mean, how do you diversify? How do you have all of these different things to make it work? Farming isn't easy. Trying to go for funding and talking to different lenders about like, hey, we want to do this expansion. And as soon as you say you're an ag, like, oh yeah, you're high risk. We'll give you a 6-month loan. It's like, what? You want me to take out at first, to me, $20,000 was like a huge loan. And they were like, oh yeah, we can do that for 6 months. And I was like, wait, well, I go throw up to try to figure out how I can pay that much that quickly. I'll be back. So we bootstrapped, and we really learned and worked and tried to figure things out differently. And I have an incredible team who I can go to and say, hey guys, I know we need to do this. Help me think this through.
Yeah, it's a big leap of faith, isn't it?
It is.
To jump out of that plane, to use your phrase.
I walked away from benefits. I walked away from job stability. I walked away from, a set schedule and sick days and paid off time. In any kind of normal 9 to 5, not that teaching was ever 9 to 5, but that's a whole separate story. But this is where I belong. This is my place. And I only have so much time on this earth to be a steward of the earth. And how can I do it and make a change for the next generations that are behind me? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. And that's what we're doing.
It's great. I feel like we've talked before on this podcast about, we've called them like the noble professions, basically. And I think that teaching and ag both fall under that umbrella. They're also, I think, two of the hardest professions to be a part of. So, obviously there's a lot of teachers right now that are leaving the industry for various reasons. But I feel like it was almost like out of the frying pan into the fire for you, or you went like right into like one of the other really hard jobs to have. But kudos, because you're doing great work.
It's been interesting because of the background that I had, teacher conferences. So when I have somebody who comes in who does a consult with me, I'm like, oh, I know how to read that person and understand maybe what they're trying to say or what they're trying to do. Or some of my other staff are like, how did you understand what they were saying? I was like, it's just practice. So you're right, out of the frying pan into the fire. FFA, an ag teacher compared to a regular teacher, most of the time teachers, like a history teacher, an English teacher, like those guys, the kids come, it's like a bug's life. They come, they eat, they leave. Like they come in, you have them for one semester, maybe if you're lucky, you have them for a year, you have them, and then they're gone. Ag, CTE, I had them for 3 years. So we better figure out how to get along. We better know how each one ticks and how we can work together, because it was 3 years, but it's also trips. These are kids that I took across the country. So it's overnights, long stays. It's knowing when, hey, they're hungry. Like, so all of those things, I feel like honestly, if I had to dial it all the way back, my training in Girl Scouts, being a Girl Scout leader with my girls, was that stepping stone of, from the cookie money to all of the things. And I was a Girl Scout as a kid. I was a Girl Scout forever because I loved it, because it was another excuse for me to be outside. Take me camping, please. So for me to do all of those things and then to step into education, well, that was a no-brainer for me. It was easy for me to then be like, oh, well, I can do this like this. And it was a different perspective. So when I stepped out of that, I still had all of that training and background and stuff, that I was able to take with me to know that, whether it's a knock on the door at the hotel room at 2:30 in the morning because somebody's sick from dinner, compared to the alarm that has to go off at 2:30 in the morning because it has snowed and I have to go clean off the hoop house. It's it's
Yeah.
not the same, but it's like it's a beat and a rhythm that you either get or you don't get. Does that make any sense?
Oh no, I
Yeah,
get it. I
yeah.
get it. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, oh God.
So what are some common misconceptions that people have about flower farming? Because it's not a branch of ag that you really hear about all the time.
Let me tell you what, people ask all the time, are you hiring? And I have to be very, very clear in what they're getting into. It is not peaches and rosebuds and flowers all day long. It's sweat and bugs and mud and tears, and it's true ag. It is true ag. It's a lot more handwork. I don't have a tractor that I can sit in a cab, and I'm not knocking grain farming by any means. They work crazy hours. They do as many difficult things. I'm just saying from our perspective, it's a lot of handwork. It's every seed is planted by hand. Every seed is then transplanted by hand. Every flower is hand cut. So there's a lot of, I feel like, misconceptions where people are like, oh, it must be so fun. And I'm like, it is fun and it's amazing and it's beautiful and it's awesome. But it's also just as hard as the peach farmer and the rosemary farmer and the grain farmer and the sheep farmer and anything else that's related to ag. I feel like there's a couple misconceptions, and that's probably the biggest one that I see is, you want to come work for us, that's great. If you love crafts and designs and things like that, awesome, perfect. That is definitely the vision. But the hardest work and what makes that possible is all of the field work on this side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I could easily be. I feel like it's almost like when I go to the zoo and I look at the monkeys, I'm like, it would be so great to have a monkey as a pet. And then it's like, no, you don't want a monkey as a pet. You just like the idea of it. Where it's like, I come to a flower farm, it's like, I just want to be surrounded by beautiful flowers forever and ever. But it's like, wait, no, like there's a lot of really hard work that goes into this. You just have to think past the initial like excited feeling, right?
Yeah. What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What is the reality? And I try really, really hard on our Instagram and quite frankly, our podcast to like, here's the reality behind it. We did an amazing, probably, I don't want to say it's one of my favorites because I love them all because they're so unique and individual to each person. But I particularly enjoyed a wedding that we did this year already because the bride's attention to detail was unlike anything I experienced. She had kids that were there. So during cocktail hours, she had a petting zoo come in.
Oh
I
my
mean, it
gosh.
was so her attention to detail was phenomenal. But the behind the scenes on that, the pergola that we decorated, that was like literally head to toe flowers, gorgeous, full, amazing, it was the first day after 5 days of straight miserable rain. So they had laid a kind of like a fake turf grass area down. The fireworks guy got stuck behind the pergola trying to set up because he sank in the field. The pergola itself was windy. It was so windy because it was the day after all of that rain. Because you've got rain, and then the next day, Mother Nature's like, "Hey, we're gonna dry it out real quick. Let's blow." And so the pergola was moving, like everything everywhere was just. It was a lot. She had tried to have heaters. The propane heaters kept tipping over. The cocktail tables blew away. Like,
Oh my gosh.
it was incredible. But that's not what you see in the pictures. So kudos to the photographers for sure. And it takes a lot of last minute infrastructure. Well, that's not going to work, but we still have to get the vision to come through. How do we do it? Rain delays or rain changes or just any of those last minute things. that's all stuff that when you pick your vendor, you have to make sure that you have confidence that they're going to execute your vision. And that, honestly, to dial back to your question of, flower farming, we're a little different because we're both. We're the flower farmer and we're the designer. So my girls can go out in the field and say, okay, we have a pink and white wedding this weekend. We're going to go out, we're going to cut specifically for those colors. And maybe the hue of pink we need to, shift a couple more flowers over here or something like that. And it gives us some flexibility. It also gives us a lot of pressure to make sure that we do have the correct hues, understanding what the trends are and knowing what's coming. Because if it's not in the field, we do hold a wholesale license in case somebody wants something specific. I don't know what it is with grandmothers and gardenias. In like August, they're always like, "Oh, honey, you have to have a gardenia because it's either good luck or family or tradition or something like that." And there's times through the year where it's like I can't even get them. They get like fake wooden ones at certain times in the year because you just can't get them. So, I mean, trying to do all of the things is
Well,
it's
actually,
important.
trying to do all the things actually leads exactly into my next question. And we'll come back to talk about like weddings and trends a little bit later. But I know that you have a flower subscription service. And I know from attending your talk that you do all the deliveries yourself of these orders. So how on earth do you handle all the time and work demands of the growing process, which we've talked about is like so hands-on and so much effort, but then also doing all the deliveries? I mean, that seems like so much demand. So how do you handle all of that?
I have an incredible team. I have an absolutely incredible team. Um, I am able to walk away from the field because I have people in the field who know how to run the rototiller, who know how to manage different situations as they come up through the day. Folks know that on the weekend, I'm pretty unavailable because I'm at some part of a setup, either Lizzie or myself or one of the other girls who has been with me for a long time is at one of those setups. I mean, it's just part of the commitment to what we do for having a high quality process. I don't ever want people to feel like they're being processed. I want them to know that when they choose to work with us, they become like part of our family because they're sharing their moment and their family with us. And that goes for not just a wedding, but for a birthday arrangement. They're taking that moment and choosing us to share that with them. And that's important to me. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and delivered and dropped something off. You knock on the door and people don't expect that. They don't know, who's knocking at my door, who's here and why. And the expressions are priceless. I should do before and afters. But when they open the door and they see it's the flowers, the day when it's the wedding day and it's the bride and she opens the door, the day when it's somebody's birthday and it's an office, like any of those things, people's expressions change and they're happy. And to me, that just feeds my soul. Like it's just such a good thing. And the squeals, the little like all those little sounds that you get to hear and see from people, or the like those are all things that are part of why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm. Very rewarding, I'm sure.
I love that. I do
100%.
feel like just in general, flowers make people very happy. Flowers make me very happy.
Yeah,
so like
me too.
I agree. They are sunshine in physical form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I really enjoy gardening, and that kind of brings me to what I wanted to ask you next. I'm sure people see your flowers and if they're like me, immediately start wondering like, how can I get my home garden to grow plants that produce blooms as beautiful as the ones on your farm? I guess what tips do you have for home gardeners, things they might be overlooking?
It's interesting to me how many times people will call or email or reach out through lots of different methods where they're like, hey, I planted a tray of seeds and nothing grew, or I got one. Can you tell me why? I'm like, okay, pause, back up. What were they? What where did you have the tray? Did you water it? Did you bottom water it? Like, I think it depends on knowing what you want. So there's so much information out there, and I feel like it can get very overwhelming. I have shade and I want to plant plants. What should I plant? Well, what kind of shade tree do you have? Do you have something that's like, is it a pine? So if it's a pine, is it acidic? No, don't just assume that you can just, oh, I'm going to plant flowers and it's going to be great. It's a ton of work. It's not easy. You just like a tomato or a pepper or a potato, you have to know what that plant wants. And on the flip side, be kind to yourself. It's okay because sometimes the squirrels come and chew every bean off the top. Like you can't do
Yeah.
anything about
Yeah.
it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Boy, do I.
oh my gosh. Oh my
I'm in a
gosh. So,
perpetual war against the deer in our yard.
I was gonna say I've been fighting a war against a couple groundhogs, so
oh, knock on wood. No, I don't want those. My son came to me this year and he's like, Mom, I think I'm gonna plant a garden. And I was like, okay. So he rototills this section. I was like, put it over here. We're trying to let this ground sit a little bit this year as we're rotating things. I was like, just we'll do vegetables here. Totally fine. So he rototills it. He puts mushroom soil on it, rototills it, like gets it all ready because I mean we rototilled because it was definitely weedy and hadn't been used for 2 years. And he calls me to one day and he's like, Mom, I'm like, yes. He's like, you want to plant a couple seeds for me? I was like, yes. So technically, Mom has a garden this year, which is fine. And I was so excited. I went out yesterday. I was like, you know what? Mother's Day week. It's been absolutely insane. I feel like I just feel overwhelmed. I went like an hour in the garden where it's quiet. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out to the garden. And everybody was finishing up their day and I'm waiting as they're leaving. And I look and I've got lettuce and arugula and I've got like a couple little spindly kohlrabi. I don't know what I did wrong with those, but I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm looking at everything and I'm pulling the weeds and I get further down the row and I look and the chicken is behind me, just picking the heck out of the top of all the
Oh.
stuff. I was like, come girl,
oh.
you're supposed to eat the bugs. Back up. I was like, all right, so I shoo her out. I get her to like go back over this direction. Cool. So I'm like doing my thing. And I turn and I look, and the cat now has come in and laid down on top of everything that she had pecked. Like, I'm done. I'm going inside.
Ah.
I'm
There's
doing
always
flowers.
something, right? There's always
Yeah.
something.
Oh my God. Everything wants to eat it. You know,
Yeah.
it's with the flowers, we don't have as many issues with creatures. We have a couple foxes that like to come in and kind of stomp all over stuff. So we do have a fence that's up. Because they would come in and they would chase the toads and all of the little creatures that were in there. It was so frustrating. And the deer did more damage by walking through things. Um, but when you've got a herd of 30 of them, they're gonna crush stuff. I mean, if it was one or two once in a while, I'd be like, okay, you're pruning, thank you, but so we've got a couple electric fences up and we have one big section like roses they would demolish. I just know there's certain things we wouldn't be able to do. So we've slowly been trying to do those things. Um, People ask all the time how to keep cats and squirrels away from their bulbs. I think that probably is one of the biggest questions I get asked. And what I recommend to everybody, um, there's always all kinds of like repellents and things that you can do. I like to be as natural as possible. So if you can get a hold of some forks, literally, and put them tines up, they don't like to walk on that and they leave them alone and then they eventually grow up past the forks, but it gets them through that little bit where, I mean, you put your tulips in and the squirrels try to dig it, and then the rabbits try to come in and chew them, and the forks definitely, I know it looks crazy,
That is
but
such a cool tip. I never would have
Yeah.
even considered that. That's amazing.
And I need that
plastic
because
forks.
I'm in like the year cycle where I'm gonna have to put in a lot of I should replace a lot of my bulbs this fall. So I'm already like kind of thinking because I have had trouble with squirrels in our front garden digging through. So yeah, I think we're gonna be getting some forks
Intersperse
out.
those forks. Intersperse those.
Okay.
You can get them at the dollar store. You can cut them down and
Mm-hmm.
just that way you're not trying to shove a whole fork in the ground
Yeah.
because
Oh, perfect. I'm gonna try it. I can't wait.
Yeah, I love that.
I love it.
So how do you choose what flowers you're going to grow? Does it change much from year to year? Have you tried anything new recently?
So, how do we choose? Gosh, that's a really good question. I feel like there's definitely some staples that you just have to have. You need snapdragons, you need status and stock and varieties of baby's breath, dahlias that you can just sink your face into, peonies that are just so lush and amazing. We had a little tree frog in one of our peonies this morning, makes my day.
Aw.
Oh,
He was so cute, all curled up in there. Um, you have to have filler. So we definitely always have feverfew and sweet Annie and lots of herbs. We do a lot of herbs because I want flowers to smell good and be inviting as well. There's, of course, zinnias and cosmos and some of those regular things. We have about 300 feet of eucalyptus that we cut from. That is probably one of my favorite spaces in this entire growing space that we have because you just get lost in it. It smells good. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's it's like you're working in therapy right there in the
Yeah.
field. It's just it's awesome. And for a long time, I really had put my foot down and said, we're not doing anything with roses. I don't want to do what a traditional florist will do. We don't participate in any of the FTDs or anything like that because I'm not going to have a little sunshine mug with the carnations and the roses that a normal florist would design with because our growing style is a little different. So I was like, no roses, no roses. And then my daughter, she's like, but we could have garden roses, Mom. And I was like,
Mm.
no, we couldn't. They're roses. And she's like, but we could have garden roses. They're not regular. I was like, okay, Liz. So we started to kind of dabble with some of those and we just put about 100, it's about 100 roses that went out. We have mums that go in that are not your standard Lowe's or Home Depot style short little guys. They get nice and tall and full and fluffy. Um, it depends on the trends. It depends on, there will always be green and white. Everybody will want that forever. That's a very standard color selection. But I feel like the peaches and corals, peak and valley, that was last year. Last year, if it wasn't peach and terracotta, it was blue and white. It was kind of those two things. And regionally, because we're close to the water, driftwood, oysters, all of that, people like the blue and white because they like that sea glass. I mean, near the Chesapeake Bay, it makes sense. This year is very scattered vases, lots of color, which has been so awesome. So somebody's like, I love pink and white, or I love pink and coral, or there's been a lot of purple too, which has been so cool. So, so cool. So really understanding what the trends are. And that's where the gals will sit with me and be like, did you see the reveal from the, and I don't even remember what it's from. And I'm like, from John
Mm-hmm.
Deere? I'm like, no, the wedding reveal. And I was like, yeah. But they make sure that what the trends are going to be, we are then making sure that we have colors that are going to be complementary to that.
Gotcha.
you actually already almost answered my next question already about trends because I feel like in the world we're in, trends change so quickly. What is trendy last year is suddenly no longer trendy this year,
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of flowers, there's a lot of advanced planning that has to go on. It's not like, someone comes in and they're like, hey, it's really trendy to have this flower. It's like, well, if you didn't plan it, you didn't plan it.
Right.
So how do you guys keep up with all the trends when you have to be planning so far in advance?
We start buying seed. Actually, we buy seed year round, realistically. We buy seed, we buy bulbs. So anything that will be planted in the fall, we've already pre-ordered in the spring so that we have the right color selection and things like that. We know that there are standards for the industry, but we really do rely on social media, some of the different fashion trends then translate to wedding trends. So whatever the new hot color is out of different parts of the fashion world, you tend to see mimicked over into the wedding world.
Interesting.
And again, that's the designer side that I'm like, hey guys, what are the things that you're seeing that we then are very strategic in what we're picking. Brides tend to book with us at least a year in advance, and they usually have some idea of what color they want. So that gives us enough time to get the seeds to make sure we're planting things. I don't grow specific for one bride. I don't say like, this is her block and we're only going to use this, because we use so many different colors and textures and styles that that would be counterproductive. Um, it's and sometimes it's really hard. I mean, sometimes it's really, really hard. Blue, there is very few true blue florals. You've got your hydrangeas, which are beautiful, but are very, very finicky and are prone to wilt and all kinds of difficulty if it's if it's not cloudy and cool. Hydrangeas really scare me to use because you look at them crooked and they like faint, and it's like cut it out. Toughen up. But trying to make sure that we do pay attention to those things is really important.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, just from our discussion so far today, it seems like weddings are a really big part of what you guys do. Do you see a trend of more brides wanting local flowers for weddings?
I feel like in the wedding industry in general, there's a lot more focus on local foods and local vendors, and having that network of people who are going to already kind of know each other and work together. Flowers, I feel like, are one of the last frontiers. When you think about FDA and food and regulation and drugs and all of those types of things, FDA, USDA, all of those big guys, there's been a lot of focus on foods, herbs, medicinal things, stuff like that. When it comes to flowers, I feel like we're at the edge of the revolution of awareness as to what the process is, because for so long it's just cheaper and easier to get things shipped in from Ecuador. That first wedding we did, that very first wedding where Becca was like, hey, I want you to do my wedding. And I was like, cool. And she's like, I really want a couple rainbow roses included. I was like, okay. And I was familiar with the wholesale process because of stuff with FFA. And it's just one of those things that you start to kind of get used to, because I was growing stuff in the school greenhouse, but I couldn't always supply everything that I needed for different events and things like that. So she wanted rainbow roses. We had ordered them, and there was a issue in, God, I don't remember what country it was. I think it was Ecuador. I'm not positive. So don't quote me on that. But there was an issue with labor and fuel. So they just didn't get here. They just didn't arrive because there were riots, which then didn't allow the fuel to get to the planes because it was money and all of these things. The flowers sat on the tarmac and died. I mean, and it wasn't just like our little box. I mean, it was the entire shipment that didn't go. There's times during the year, Italian ruscus. That's another one that once in a while, if there's an issue in Italy, that's not going to make it here. Luckily, we don't use that a ton. We've got other alternatives, but Italian ruscus is used so much in weddings because it stays green and lush and full outside of water. And knowing your plants is really important, because then you know how you can put together somebody's vision. this past spring, the tulip industry was really, really rocked with some disease over in Europe. And we got all kinds of notifications about our orders being shifted and changed and not available, and the fungicides that had to be applied. And so things got pushed back. And so the more local things can be, and the more people understand the process, and that's what I encourage people to do. You love pink and white, come to the farm. Come out, walk the rows, smell the flowers, taste them. If they're edible, I'll tell you what you can eat. Feel them. Get a sense of what actually grows, because most people know a rose, they know baby's breath, they know a sunflower. But once you start talking Lysianthus, once you start talking different types of cress, you start looking for different styles and textures of grasses. You look for different varieties. You've got all these different varieties and sizes of dahlias, for example. People just don't know. They have no idea what Orlea is, or agrostemma, or any of that kind of stuff. So the part of, and maybe it's my background in education, but I feel like part of my job is also to educate people that, hey, it's great to want these things, but come see some of the other options that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess yes. Question? That was a long answer.
No,
that's fine.
It works. You got there.
Yeah. So you guys at Wildly Native, you have a great website full of gorgeous pictures of flowers. You also have a blog, you're on social media, and you have a podcast of your own, which you mentioned, the Flower Files. Why is it important from a farming perspective to market your operation on so many fronts? And how do you keep up with all of them?
Again, I probably sound like a broken record, but it's my team. It's my team. We're very strategic. We have a magnetic calendar that we sit down and we fill out at the beginning of the month with, here's a product, here's a wedding, here's a funny clip or blurb, like what is our strategy? How does it tie back to what we're talking about in the Flower Files? My goal with the Flower Files is for people to understand what actually happens. What are some of the things? And we talk about farming, we talk about the wind blowing things over, we talk about candles and different styles of candles. Realistically, weddings in a perfect world happen once in a person's life. You need an accountant all the time. You need, to be able to go to the grocery store all the time. There's things that you need all the time. So if you're a gardener, you may know some stuff, but unless you're in the wedding industry, you're not going to know what you should ask and what you should be looking for. And we're a flower farmer florist on top of it. So when people come to me in December and they're like, I want to take a walk in the field, and I'm like,
good luck.
Great.
You can. There might not be much there.
Yeah, it may be a little chilly. So it makes it difficult for folks to be able to understand the process because they don't know what they don't know. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're just not sure. They don't know what to ask. They don't know what the process is. So trying to make sure all of those things are in place is important.
So as you mentioned, your business pretty much took off thanks to your daughter, who ambitiously said yes to doing your first wedding. So how has it been working with your daughter in this endeavor, like from the beginning until now?
Lizzie was in high school, and then she had that whole conundrum of, I'm going to go to college. What am I going to do? Said, I don't know. What are you going to do? She knew she loved plants. She was trying to figure out if she could do some type of design, floral design, and she ended up, so my dad went to Del Val, my husband went to Del Val, I went to Del Val, and she ended up at Del Val, which is very cool. So she ended up going to Delaware Valley University. She got her undergraduate degree in landscape design. She would come home every single weekend and work Friday, Saturday, Sunday sometimes Monday morning, depending on her classes. When she graduated, she had to make a choice because she had job offers in Texas, Florida, and New York. And she and I sat down and really had a heart to heart. It was like a mom-daughter talk, and then it was a business, like boss employee talk. What do you want? What's your perspective? What's important? And she chose to stay because she was like, if I leave and then when I come back, I'm gonna be pissed off that I left. It's like, okay. So that was, that was kind of she's been part of it from the get-go. It's hard. There's times where we're at dinner, and when you run your own business, you're on 24/7. It doesn't matter. You're always on. I get phone calls sometimes at 6:15 in the morning from somebody who's an ag, and I get phone calls 9:30 at night. Just, hey, we've had a last minute change because this is broken, and I just need to let you know that before whatever. And I take all of those things. I try really hard to guard everybody else's time and make sure that they're able to have a break and do what they need to do. But it's hard when she's sitting across the table for me at dinner and I get that phone call and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, nope, I got it. Don't worry about it. So how do you balance the mom-daughter and the boss employee kind of thing?
Yeah.
She graduated last year. So this year, and she graduated in December of last year. So 2023. Yeah, she finished school in 2023. What year is it? She finished school in 2022, walked in 2023. So she's had a year of working kind of full-time with us finally, and it's been awesome. There's things that I can fully turn over, like the podcast. That's her baby. I come in, I speak, we kind of chitter chatter about a couple things. The three of us will sit down. Amber is in on the podcast with us. We brainstorm, but she's the producer, the editor, and all of those things. She's the one who is the brainchild behind that. I know the angst and frustration with like, hey, Liz, we got to get that CRP done. And I'm like, I don't have any of the information. I don't have any of the deadlines. I don't know any of the stuff because you haven't shared that with me. And when she sat down with me and was like, hey, I don't know any of the stuff, I was like, oh my God. So I was like, okay, I get this. We need a substitute teacher binder. That's what we need.
Oh, I love that. It all ties back around somehow, right?
It does. It does. It was like the bing, light bulb went off. And I was like, oh my God, I get this. Like, if I drop dead tomorrow, somebody needs to be able to walk in, have every password, know how to pay the taxes, know how to, you know what I mean? Like who's the insurance person, who's the lawyer, who's like, they know some of the stuff, but it has to be there. Yeah. So yeah, it's because I don't ever want her to feel like she's not important. I don't ever want her to feel like it's too much. I want everybody to be happy and have fun too. Because bottom line, it's flowers. It's flowers. They're fun. They're fun.
Exactly. Flowers make people happy.
Exactly. That's why I love to deliver.
Okay, so we are at the end of our interview. We have one last question. It's the one that we always end on. And actually, you've already had a crack at this question the last time we talked to you on this podcast at the conference, but we're going to give you another go. What does being a woman in ag mean to you?
I'm glad you didn't ask me who my ag inspiration people were, because that one stresses me out because there's so many different ones. What does... I feel like being a woman in ag is still looked upon as unusual. I feel like we, meaning society, are still fighting the stigma of that stupid picture with the man with the pitchfork and the woman with the bun.
Yep.
Listen, I wear my hair in a bun, but I'm in jeans and a sweatshirt as often as I can be. I'm on the tractor, and it's still to this day odd for people to see, at least in our area, to see a woman on a tractor and a woman doing the quote unquote man work in the field. It's very unusual, and I love that we are setting an example of how to do things differently, because people think, oh, you're a flower farmer, it's fun and it's pretty. And that's why I post the rototilling and the boots and the dirt and the mud and the wet and the frustration and all of the things that happen, just like all the time in ag. It's
reality.
It is reality. And I'm sure everybody has seen the TikToks, the Instagram, the Facebook, the whatever, the social medias, where women who are considered leaders or strong, sometimes people don't know what to do with. And in ag, you have to be all of those things, or else you're going to be eaten. So you've got to know your stuff, and if not, you've got to fake it, figure it out,
fake it till you make it.
Exactly. So I think if I had to answer that in a much shorter explanation, it would be that being a woman in ag means leadership and setting an example.
Thank you so much for joining us in the farmhouse. It was great to talk to you again, since we have already talked to you.
It was wonderful to see you guys. I was so excited to do this. It's so cool to be in the other seat, because I'm used to being in the other seat. So I was like, oh, okay. It was very cool.
It was so great to talk to Liza again. I really loved meeting her back at the conference, and she just radiates joy, I feel like. She is like a flower as a person. Like she said.
I love that. Yes, she is.
So that was a good time to talk to her.
Yeah, I really enjoyed one small aspect of that interview. I mean, I enjoyed the whole thing, but one thing that stood out to me personally was when she said that purple flowers are very in right now. Purple is my favorite color. It's your favorite color too, right?
It is. We are pro purple on this podcast.
And it's also my favorite color of flower to grow. And I'm being serious when I say that it's one of the only colors of flowers that I do grow. I'm very picky about what colors I put in my garden. So I literally have like alliums, I have columbine, I have salvia, verbena, I have my lupines that I grow are also purple. I have bachelor buttons, I have pincushion flowers, I have lavender, I have lilac. I have a lot of purple in my garden. So to find that I am very on trend is
trendy.
Quite exciting.
Not just on trend, ahead of the trend.
Right. This madness has been going on for years in my garden.
I actually just learned about alliums yesterday. I had seen them. My mom grows allium, so I have seen them before. But I was not familiar with them until yesterday, when I was actually out at a different flower farm interviewing them for our paper and our website. And the grower, she was like insisting that I take some allium with me, and I was like, she's like, are you familiar with these? I was like, no, but they're gorgeous and they're purple, so I'm happy. And then I later called my mom and told her, and she's like, you do realize I have allium growing at my house? And I'm like, oh, no, but I'll have to pay closer attention apparently.
Allium has always had a special place in my heart. My Nana grows them in her very large garden. And when I was little, I used to call them the lollipop flowers, because if you're not familiar with allium, they are tall flowers that grow on a thin stalk, and at the top, this is kind of this big sphere of small purple blooms. And so Nana has always known that I love alliums, and what's nice about alliums is when you cut them, you can dry them, and they maintain their shape. And so when I got married, my Nana made my centerpieces, and they included alliums that had been spray painted to match the bridesmaids' dresses.
I love that.
Yeah. So it all comes back to weddings and flowers, I suppose, today.
But I mean, honestly, Candace and I could both talk about flowers all day long, but we will stop now. But thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. Honestly, flowers genuinely do make me very happy. So hopefully listening to us talk about flowers in this episode also made you guys very happy.
All right, well, that wraps it up. Thank you for listening to us at the Farmhouse. If you have any questions or thoughts that you would like to share, you can reach us by email at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com. You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming.
Yep, we're on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, so give us a follow if you haven't. Also, you could subscribe to our podcast. We would love that. Give us a review, give us a rating, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and that's it for us today. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
I'm Stephanie Spiker.
And thank you for dropping by the Farmhouse.
Bye. This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Wierzbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock and Matt Lee. The music you've been hearing throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.